dear. The 50-year wait is over for the Bucks. After the Suns take the first two games, Milwaukee goes 4 straight dubs. What was the turning point of this series in your eyes, Kenny?
Oh, Emerson, it had to be in game 4, those Chris Paul turnovers down the stretch. I mean, that was a game. The Suns led almost the entire way. And then late in that game, Chris Paul gave the Bucks that win. I mean, they turned the ball over multiple times down the floor, and the Bucks came from behind in the very waning moments of that game to take it. And the Suns were just, I mean, they could taste a 3-1 lead. If the Suns took a 3-1 lead, we know all the memes. It is near impossible to blow a 3-1 lead unless LeBron James is on the other side of the floor. All credit to the Bucks. We're gonna spend this whole segment talking about how great Giannis is, how well they played, but the Suns had a 3-1 lead right there in their grasp, and they let it slip through their hands, and then they never won another game. So I think that was absolutely the turning point here. Game 3, going back home to Milwaukee, they win by 20 points, whatever, it happens. You get a big home win. Game 4 was when the Suns needed to take back control, and they couldn't do it.
Nick, what about for you? What was the turning point of this series?
I think it's the same sequence that Kenny talked about. It's the turnover for Chris Paul. It's the block by Giannis Antetokounmpo on DeAndre Ayton that completely flipped that game, a game that the Suns led throughout. The Suns led much more than the Bucks did throughout this entire series. I don't know what the exact figures were, but they played better overall, I thought, when you take these 6 games on aggregate. They outshot the Bucks from the field. They outshot the Bucks from 3. They outshot the Bucks from the free throw line. 4 out of the 6 games in this series, I felt like Phoenix was in control of, at least to begin. Games 1 and 2, game 4, and then even game 5 when they jumped out to that 17-point lead and immediately blew it. It was kind of the inverse of what we saw in game 6 last night, where the Bucks had that great first quarter and then immediately did not score for like 5 minutes to begin the second. Phoenix just was not able to execute late in these games. Early in the first quarter, in the second quarter, in the third quarter, when things are a little more loose, they seem like the better team. But when push came to shove, when they absolutely needed to get stops and needed to get buckets, they couldn't do it 4 times in the series.
Hey, guys, do you want me to ask Julian this question? Is he in? Is his internet working? No? Jules, you're here. No. Good to have you here. Good morning to you. What would you say the turning point of the NBA Finals was this whole series?
Brutal morning for me. Bad internet. I'm wearing the same hat as Kenny. Can't get a win. And I also bet on the Suns. So, yeah, the turning point in this series was the series going to Milwaukee. I don't know what these guys said because I wasn't in the Zoom, but, the home team was carrying serve in this series and broke serve in game 5 in Phoenix. So I think just Milwaukee getting that momentum going and getting that confidence going in game 3 in a 20-point win is what turned the series, because after that it was 2 very close wins and a tied game going into the fourth quarter in game 6. So Milwaukee took care of business in all 3 close games. So just that confidence booster, that momentum swing of getting a sweat-free win in game 3 kind of spun everything around, and they didn't turn back from there, winning all 3 close games.
50 points from Giannis to seal game 6. I mean, the clear choice for MVP, Jules, but is he the clear choice for fantasy MVP? So in other words, did he provide DraftKings users with the most value throughout the finals?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I don't know. We can crunch some numbers on like fantasy points per dollar, I guess. But like Giannis had multiple games with over 100 points in the captain spot. So how can you make an argument for anywhere else? 3 40-plus point games, the 50-point game to cap it off, with the rebounds, with the blocks, threatening for a triple-double. It's not close.
What about you, Nick?
Yeah, I don't really see an argument for anybody but Giannis. I think even if you do the fantasy point per dollar argument, Giannis still might come out on top. I mean, Chris Middleton obviously had some nice moments in this series, had a nice, well-rounded, stat line in terms of his averages. On the Phoenix side, Devin Booker had some big scoring games, but didn't do a whole lot in terms of rebounding or assists. Doesn't provide a lot of value defensively when you're talking DraftKings points. I think the only guy when you're talking about the Suns who has a chance, to really be in this conversation is DeAndre Ayton, who averaged about 15 points, 12 rebounds, 2 assists, 1.5 steals, 1.5 blocks. But even though he comes in at a cheaper salary than Giannis on a night-to-night basis, those numbers pale in comparison to what we saw from Giannis, who capped it off with, one of the virtuoso, not only memorable closeout NBA Finals performances, but one of the greatest fantasy performances in the NBA Finals history.
Yeah, the unanimous MVP, Kenny. The unanimous fantasy MVP, though?
Yeah, I think we can say it's unanimous. Excuse me. Julian gave you all the numbers. And when you look at the other side with the Phoenix Suns, Devin Booker, of course, the big games, but a couple of games where he went missing. Chris Paul, 22 points and 8 assists. But again, he had two pretty big clunkers in this series. DeAndre Ayton wasn't quite the force that we thought he would be. Yeah, I'm willing to give it to Giannis. I mean, I think that the biggest thing you can say about him is that he didn't flop in any game. There was no turning back once Giannis went into the finals from game one when he was hurt and he had an insane, I think it was 20 points and 20 rebounds, something like that, or close to it. I mean, he just turned it on from game one and never let up. And you were never upset that you paid for Giannis. And I think that is the definition here of a fantasy MVP.
Okay, let's go to the opposite end of this spectrum, Nick. Least valuable player, the fantasy LVP. Maybe someone you were upset that you were paying for.
I mean, can it be a player from the winning team? Because the way that Drew Holiday played at times in this series, I think he's the candidate. The averages at the end of the series look okay. Basically averaged 16 and 10, had some big rebounding games, fell 1 rebound short of a triple-double, in fact, last night, and had 4 steals. So you can't necessarily complain about what he did fantasy-wise, but there were some games where, if you captain Drew Holiday in a single-game contest in Game 4, for example, when he's 4 of 20 from the field and only has 13 points, you probably came up a little bit empty. And I think it's pretty hard to poke any holes in the games of the rotation players for both teams. If you want to come out and say, like, Cameron Payne's your LVP, well, nobody really expected all that much from Cameron Payne. And Drew Holiday, again, had some big moments in this series, but overall, I mean, sub 40%, well under 40% from the field in these playoffs. Started the game 1 of 12 last night. Obviously, the Bucks were able to persevere. Obviously, he gave them a ton of value elsewhere, especially on D. But fantasy-wise, he was a little shaky.
All right, who was shaky in your eyes, Kenny? Enough to earn your fantasy LVP.
We're really only going to have like 12 players to pick from or whatever. So, yeah, I mean, Drew Holiday, I think, is going to be the consensus. But I will take a moment to flame Cameron Payne because really, I do think that there was not a lot of value in this entire NBA Finals. And you were looking down the list. You needed some value. And Mikal Bridges wasn't playing enough. He was expensive. It wasn't his fault. And you couldn't really go to him. Cam Johnson provided the value early in the series and then kind of disappeared. But really, Cameron Payne was never good in this entire NBA Finals. He only played 15 and a half minutes. He scored seven points per game, shot 35% from 3. And I just think that, ultimately a lot of people turned to Cameron Payne with the struggles of Chris Paul. There were the whispers of the wrist injury with Chris Paul. I think that Cameron Payne was, I don't have the ownership numbers in front of me, but he seemed to be a decently popular option in almost every game because people were kind of waiting for that Cameron Payne game, and it never came. So I think that Drew Holiday here is easily the fantasy LVP, but if I have to pick 2 other guys, maybe Cameron Payne and Cameron Johnson, the 2 Cams, because both of those guys really disappointed in the NBA Finals, and there was just no value without those guys.
Who's your pick for LVP? Jules?
Yeah, it's tough. Like Kenny said, there's only so many guys in the rotation this deep in the season, and a lot of the big-time players put up big-time numbers. So I think without a doubt it is Drew Holiday. We can all agree there. Just too many duds as a guy with so much volume, 4 of 19 shooting last night. Still, though, he was was it an assist or a rebound away from a triple-double in that Game 6. So he still found a way to get some numbers. Like Kenny said, campaign, we're stretching a little bit, but yeah, he could have been better. The only other name maybe I'll throw in for third place here is a guy like Brook Lopez that, was good, but he wasn't getting as many minutes. A lot of those minutes were going to Connaughton for the small ball lineup. Could have been a little bit more valuable, but again, nothing egregious. It was Holiday and then maybe those 2 other role players as the second and third place guys.
All right, Bucks sitting at plus 900 to repeat here, dudes. That's the 3rd best odds behind Brooklyn and the Lakers. How much do you like those odds for betting on a repeat, Kenny?
I don't like them. I think that this year, first of all, I think that we learned in this postseason, especially over the NBA Finals, that both of these teams stink. Okay, the Milwaukee Bucks clearly have a lot of issues on offense. I was rooting for them to win the NBA Finals because I was rooting for a team to fire their head coach after winning the NBA Finals for the first time ever. I mean, Mike Budenholzer has done everything in the world to deserve to be fired, and he just won the NBA Finals, which is insane. This team has a lot of issues. They need to figure out how they're going to score in the half court, because when the pace slows down like it did in the playoffs, they were lost. They didn't really know what to do. So I think that they are going to be, kind of taken out to the woodshed by a team like the Brooklyn Nets if they're healthy with all three guys. And conversely, on the other side, the Phoenix Suns, what did they do after the hot starts in the last two series in the Western Conference Finals? They got really lucky against the LA Clippers, who didn't even have Kawhi Leonard, and then they blew that 2-0 lead. I don't trust either of these teams. I think either of these teams are good, and I think that the Lakers and the Nets here are well-deserved favorites. And I think that honestly, the Lakers, too many people are sleeping on, because we saw injuries were a huge issue for the Lakers with Davis and James getting hurt right before the playoffs, and they never really got back up to full strength. That they'll probably add someone this offseason. The Clippers as well, I think, are very dangerous as long as Kawhi's playing. So I pretty much like everybody up here, as the favorites to win the NBA Finals, except for the Milwaukee Bucks. They do have Giannis, I know, but that's just not going to be enough.
You like everyone except the Bucks, Jules?
Yes, I'm betting on all 29 other teams except for the Bucks. Can't lose. So, Kenny's right. The odds are a little too high on the Bucks. It's too early to just back them again and say they're going to do it again. My money was on the Nets this year. I don't feel wrong for having my money on the Nets. I feel like we got a little bit of a bad beat, just like people who bet on the Lakers, the Clippers, even the Hawks in that series with Trae Young going down in the Eastern Conference Finals feel like they got a bad beat. And everybody that had the Bucks, Giannis just missing 2 games and coming back for that game 1, got extremely fortunate. Like, that was only a few weeks ago Giannis got injured, and I feel like we're already losing that storyline where there was a chance he was going to miss next year, and now we're talking about the Bucks repeating and Giannis getting 2 titles. I think it's going to be a Nets revenge tour. I think they're going to find a way to stay healthy. I think they're going to come into camp with a little more, Harden will be in shape. I think they're going to have a little more added motivation going through this losing season. There aren't conference odds up yet on DK Sportsbook. The West is going to have a motivated Lakers team, a remotivated Warriors team, on top of all the good teams we have out there already. So if the Nets are plus 200 to win it all right now, if you can get them for around even money to win the East and get past the Bucks, who knows what the Sixers will look like? Who knows what the Celtics will look like? Miami.
The Knicks.
Get the Knicks the hell out of here.
Damian Lillard.
Give me Brooklyn. Sure, Kenny. Yeah, Damian Lillard. Give me the Nets at even money to win the East as the future that I want. The Nets are going to plow through teams, especially the Knicks if they get the Knicks.
Okay, Nick, real quick, thoughts on the Bucks having the third best title odds here? I mean, is that where you're putting your money on, or are you going somewhere else?
I mean, at 9-1, there's a decent amount of value considering they're the defending champions. But I mean, these guys put it right. I mean, the Nets are the best team when they're healthy. They almost beat Milwaukee when they were like 33% healthy this year, and they're probably not going to have the same injury luck that they had, in 2021. So I would put my money on the Nets. I think 2-1 for a team that's that loaded is not too bad at all. We'll see what happens with the Sixers. That's the one team that, if they're able to acquire Damian Lillard, all of a sudden that really changes things for them. But if they stand pat, if the Heat stand pat, if the Hawks stand pat, I think Milwaukee is still pretty firmly, to me, the second best team in the East. But the gap between Milwaukee and Brooklyn when the Nets are fully healthy, it's bigger than you'd ideally want it to be if you're the Bucks.